Okay, so for a front view portrait, we're going to start with just the basic shape of the head. It's kind of like an egg shape. Choosing where your top is and your bottom, and then the left and the right. Right now I'm just sort of putting those marks in so that I have kind of a boundary for my oval. And I know kind of where my ears are, comes in. I have a very round chin, not a very pointy chin. But this head shape is going to change a lot as we start adding features, so don't feel like you need to be locked into it, all right? I'm starting very lightly. I'm starting with a red colored pencil just so that you can see kind of those guidelines. You'll want to start with an HB pencil or a number 2 pencil, and then maybe go up to a 2 or a 4B to get those darker features in. All right. So then the next step are my center lines. So I'm going to do a vertical center line, and notice I'm moving my arm. I'm not doing a lot of wrist movements. I'm doing a lot of arm movements, and then kind of gauging where that is, and then I'm going to sight it. Measure there, all right? And this is where my eyes are. That often throws people off, but if you measure, right, there, bottom of my chin, and here, top of my head. All right, so that's a really important measurement, because I have to know what's below it, what's above it, and that things are, that I'm working with the right size shape of my head. All right, the next most important measurement are the thirds of my face. So this is between my eyes, so just above that is between my eyebrows, so that's about here. And then the hairline, under my nose, and under my chin. Now, for many people this is equal, but it may not be, so you want to measure it. I know for me, if I look, okay, between my eyebrows and my nose, between my eyebrows and my hairline, so those are equal. But then I know that's right about here. It's a little hard to see with the beard, but there is a little bit more chin. So I know the bottom third of my face is longer. So I can't just divide this in half. I know it's a little bit higher. So I'm going to do this and sight that, okay? And then this measurement to that measurement, right? So there's my hairline, between my eyebrows, under my nose. So 1, 2, and then I know that my bottom third is a little longer. Okay. And, I can check it. When I am sighting, I want to have my arm locked, and I'm putting the top of my pencil or the eraser where I am, and my thumbnail, 1, 2/3, and then it's about there, so I know I have a little bit more. All right, the next measurement is the width of my face, and our heads are typically about 5 eyes wide. Again, this may differ. You may have more space in between your eyes. You may have more space on either side, but generally that is a good rule to follow. So I can check that. So I'm going to measure the width of my eye, in between my eyes, the next eye, and then remembering that it's the widest part of my head. That may not be here. That may be above your ear, behind your ear. All right, so that's 1, 2, and then 3, 4, and 5 eyes. Now, the other thing to keep in mind that, if I'm closer, farther away, if I am drawing from a photograph or maybe the front of my camera, and I'm looking at my, say, phone screen and using the front of my camera, that may have a wider lens that's going to distort features. A mirror is really best because you're not going to get that distortion as long as it's a flat surface. So I'm gonna, alright, so, and this one sometimes it's a little tricky to get you have to do a lot of erasing. Yeah, like so. Put a little too much space there. Bring that in. Don't be afraid to erase. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 eyes. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's there. Now, remember, that's not necessarily here. That could be behind your ears. All right. And then you're going to draw some vertical lines. So I'm going to look at where is the center of my eye. And for me, that is just inside my nose. So if this is the center of my eye, my nose is just outside of that. Right? And then I can look at my mouth. All right. All right. So here, the corner of my mouth is just inside the center of my eye. So if that's the center of my eye, just inside that. Center of my eye, just inside that. Okay. And then I can find my ears. So the tops of my ears for me are at the top of my eye and right there at the center of my, just a little bit below, kind of in between where my eyebrows are, so that third, and my center line. And keep in mind too that, if I'm looking down, they're going to look higher. If I'm looking up, they're going to look lower. So making sure that we're staying kind of consistently looking at the mirror. The other thing that's really important is I have my drawing in front of me. I can look up, see my reflection, and look down. That I'm not twisting, that I'm not having to move too much as I'm looking back and forth. So the nose or the ear, kind of there's my center line, there's that eyebrow, so my ears are just about in the middle there. And then the bottom of my ear, again, make sure that my perspective is correct, is just below my nose. So if there's my nose, my ear is here. Alright, so I'm just putting the height in, I'm not going to worry about the shape yet. Alright, that's my nose. Okay, then let's find our mouth. Now, typically, halfway between under our nose and our chin is the bottom of our bottom lip, and so our mouth is above that. So if I look, now, that is where that third would be, but again, because my chin is a little bit longer, my mouth is actually a little bit higher. But I know that if that was the thirds, right, there, halfway is the bottom of my bottom mouth. So I can check. So about 1 and like a third underneath, right? So I'm going to put kind of like a little box in for where that is. And then top, I'm sighting again, my arm is locked. So about in half is the top of my lip. And then I want to look at where the corners of my mouth are. They're, they may be at the bottom, they may be center, they may be higher. Mine is about like 2/3 above the corner, 2/3 up, and then about a third down. So like if I were to divide that into thirds, that's my lip. I have that little V there. Kind of sweeps up, and there's a video for drawing features, which we'll get into. Okay, but those are all the basic look at where our eyes are, right? And then hairline. Okay, so now that we've got those in place, I can start adding a little bit more detail. So I can look at where my hairline is, looking at this distance. Alright, I can start to think about my eyebrows. Alright, they start a little bit outside of where my nose is. Okay, I can think about the box of my eye in between my eyebrows there, so my eye is just a little bit below that. Okay, that's center line. Here's my eye. So that's going to come up. And then is the outside corner of my eye above, on that center line, or below? Mine is a little bit above that center line, so it's about here. And then looking at the kind of eyeball shape. Mine is very round, like this is sort of a gradual slope and very round. And then the bottom, there's not as much below that center line. It's always tricky getting the eyes to match, and they may not match, so you have to look carefully. One eye might be a little more tilted, a little bit, and keeping these lines light. It's getting a little heavy in there. And then when I'm looking at the pupil, my pupil and my iris, the iris is the colored part, just touches. Keeping in mind that iris is a circle, right? It's not a parentheses, so you can do a full circle and then erase what you don't want. All right. And then when I look at my nose, kind of block it out like it's a robot nose. Looking at the shapes of those nostrils. Mine has this kind of hill shape. And then the bottom nostril just sort of comes in. And the nose is really tricky because there's not a lot of hard lines on it. The nostril has lines, but then a lot of the nose is just value. Like in here, it's about shading. So it can be tricky to know what to draw. Lighting yourself can be important to give yourself a little bit of shadow. All right, I'm looking at like this distance here. Where my eyebrow comes in. I'm getting some side light, all right? The lip, looking at this bottom lip shape. Kind of comes up, my top lip comes over it a little. Is your lip straight across? Comes down a bit. Looking at the thickness of that lip. Okay. Alright, then I can start thinking about my ear. How much of the lobe that I see. Just a little bit kind of hugging the edge of my face. And I can start shaping the outside of looking at this distance. Looking at this shape is kind of straight, and then it sort of comes out. And again, it's a little tricky with a beard, because am I drawing the hair, am I drawing the skin? Now that I got some edges in, I can start thinking about hair. Alright, and so this was the head, but my hair is above that. the top of my ear. Bottom, there's it right there. And again, if I'm looking one way or the other, you might see more of one ear, more of the other, so kind of keeping your head in the right place. I don't see much. I think this one I had sticking out too much. Okay. And then for me, putting in, and I'm looking at this shape, and then kind of the beard contour. Makes me look so much younger. And then the beard is longer. Okay. And then now that I have that, I can think about the neck. Right? So typically our neck is between the outside corner of our eye and the edge of the head. So I can drop kind of a center line right there. So just about there. You know, and if you want to give some context, whether it's a collar, you know, if you're trying to put the shoulders in, a lot of people make their shoulders too small. You actually have a whole head next to you on either shoulder for how wide your shoulders are. There's a collar. Get that eyebrow in. And I'm looking at this space here. Okay. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with those proportions. That foundation is so critical. You know, if I put the eyes in the wrong place, if I don't have my eyes in the middle, if I don't have the thirds of my face, it doesn't matter how well I draw that eye, it's going to be in the wrong place, and it's not going to look like me. It might look like a person, and that's really the difference, that, you know, you can probably learn those features and get it to look like a person, but if you want it to look like you, or look like the person you're drawing, it's those tiny little differences. You know, the little slope of a nose. I'm going to go in now with a 2B and start adding some value. And I'm just doing it lightly. If I look at the eye, you've got the tear duct. There's thickness to that lid. Often people just draw lids as a single line. There's another line up above. You know, eyelashes, you have to be careful, really subtle. They can, you know, you don't want them to look like spider legs. And then I'm just going to go in lightly with a little bit of value for the eye. I'm not going to go crazy yet. That pupil in. You know, leave a little bit of it unfinished for that highlight. Got a little bit. You know, and then the white of our eye, there's often like a little bit of shading in there, whether it's shadow or, you know, a little bit of redness or pinkness or gray that's showing through. Eyes are always tricky because we're looking at the thing we're drawing. We're looking into our own eyes, using our eyes to draw. And so often, like I know I always had trouble making them too large. You know, or you draw your eyes like this because you're straining to see them, to look at them. You know, or our pupils are too big and our iris is too big. You know, looking at that white space, how big is that? And don't be afraid, you know, something's off. Go in with the eraser. Look at the direction of my marks, especially for things like the eyebrow. Go lightly at first, again, so they don't look like caterpillars on your face. We've got layering, layering, layering. Using more the side. Now, if you need to put a piece of paper under your hand so that you're not smudging. You know, and lips can be tricky too because you don't want to, you know, sometimes if you make them too dark, it's like you're wearing lipstick. You have to think, even though maybe a different color, is the value different than your skin by that much? You know, and then even though I have a beard, there is still a lot of different values in it. So I can go back in and same thing with the hair. You know, and I'm not trying to draw strands of hair. I'm thinking about it like shapes of value. Clean up some of those straight lines. The eraser is also a really nice tool to go in and add some highlights to things. You know, especially like say on your nose. I might go in like this and then erase out switching back to my HB pencil to get some of the lighter values in there. You know, and take a minute, step back, check, see what things look like. You know, I can see like this eye is a little low. There's maybe a little too much space in between those eyes, maybe. That corner of that mouth is maybe a little wide. And I can just keep layering those values. You know, and there's not really a shortcut. It's just time, looking, adjusting. Yeah, I think that helped that eye. You know, and my eyes might look a little too light with all without more shading. You know, that might look better. And the thing is, you know, that trying to look at what areas, you know, this is looking very flat because it's all one value. So going in and letting my marks kind of follow the contours of my face. You know, resisting the urge to smudge it because that's just going to flatten it out even more. I'm getting this kind of cool, you know, really 3D look to this eye over here because of all the light and shadow that's under there. And that just makes it easier. You know, if you're working in very flat light, it's going to be harder to make it look three-dimensional because the light isn't giving you highlights and shadows. You know, looking at shadows in that top lip of mine. Under my nose. You know, and I find most people just don't go dark enough. You really want to get that full range of values. Okay. You can see this like highlight running down the corner Now, when I look at this from a distance, I can see, I think my eyes are actually a little too far apart. When I actually look at this measurement compared to the head, I think, or it's this side, I think this side ended up getting a little too short. I think this proportion looks better. And I think that could be, if I'm tilting a little bit more, I'm seeing less of one side. Overall, pretty happy with it. And I might give a kind of side pencil. Maybe the beard could be a little darker. And changing the marks is what gives more depth to it. Changing the direction, that is. In the last step I might go in and erase some things, clean up some of those marks. Smudges. Sometimes too, giving it a little bit of depth, if I think about some atmosphere. Kind of define, even if that's not what I'm seeing behind me, can be fun.